Welcome back to India Tonight. How do we get out of the trap of bandhs and hartals towards a more intelligent and effective expression of difference? Sujit Bhalla, how do we, as a society, encourage the exchange of ideas, which is what democracy is about, rather than perceive democracy as a battle between individual personalities and what one in Punjabi calls tu tu main main? How do we make that transition?
Well, one simple way is that that bandhs are allowed or marches are allowed, let's call them marches rather than bandhs. I think the Supreme Court did pass a ruling sometime about a decade ago in West Bengal that no bandhs were to be allowed. So if bandhs is a stoppage of work, that should be banned. In other words, there is no reason, there is no place in a democracy, in a modern society, maybe in a feudal society, but in a modern society where shops are closed or where activity is come to a stop. Marches you do want. You want to allow people to be able to protest, and there's a licensing system. That is, a political party takes out a license or gets a license to have a march, which is in a stipulated time, which is in a stipulated place, and if there is violence, then that party can be held accountable.
All right.
Otherwise, you want to have a march, it is not every day that you can have a march, but every now and then you get a license, and if you've been a good person, you've been a good party, you get that license. Otherwise, you don't get that license.
All right.
Basically, politicians have to be held accountable.
I understand.
There is no accountability in the system.
I understand. One way, of course, is regulate your protests, restrain them, confine them. Dr. Narayan, is another way of ensuring that difference is expressed intelligently rather than divisively by making sure that the press is more effective. One of the things that perhaps didn't happen and which added to the frustration of the left was that their critique of the entire oil price wasn't picked up by any paper with the possible exception of the Hindu, and therefore had it been ventilated better, it might not have led to the left holding bandhs. You might have instead had an intelligent debate, which might have been a more effective way for the left to try and corner the government than try to do so from the street. So does the press need to rethink their role as well?
There's no doubt about that, Karan. If any democracy is to function, elections of course are important, but ultimately it's the media, the middle class, the intellectual elites in the country, and the courts and the other constitutional authorities. Unfortunately, there is a failing in almost all these institutions in this country. Courts, of course, have been repeatedly voicing concern about bandhs and other unconstitutional modes of protest, but the media's discourse is extremely shallow. Extremely shallow, I'm sorry to say this, but in general, with a few honorable exceptions, there's been no meaningful and intelligent debate at all, either in raising the right kind of issues or debating in the right kind of way, coming out with the facts and analysis and logic, and so on and so forth. And there's this sensationalism. The middle class is too laid back and too focused on their own personal goals without really looking at the larger picture. Right now, all over the country, I don't know if you received, but I received at least 7 or 8 SMSs about the so-called pricing of these commodities all over the world and in India. It's absolutely unsubstantiated. I mean, we are simply feeding each other garbage in the name of information. There's no informed debate, there's no information at all. And the elites in the country have given up in a substantial measure.
That's a very good. I'm going to stop you there because we're running out of time. I'm just going to stop you there because I want to bring in Dr. Mehra before we run out of time. Dr. Mehra, you've written a whole book that actually tackles this very subject. Is there also a wider message for the Indian people? We've talked about the press, we've talked about the politicians, but what about the Indian people as voters and as political masters? Are there things they need to do that can ensure that politicians don't resort to bandhs?
No, Karan, I do want to stay with the quality of the public discourse, because individual people are informed by that, and they would be impelled to take actions based on what they judge to be appropriate, and therefore the quality of the public discourse is critical. And I would say that when we're talking about, and you're rightly pointing out, the way issues are brought forth in the media, quite often like debates about, who's right, who is wrong, and insulting people in the process quite often also. That is not a good way to inform people. It's a good way to entertain them. And I found that in the United States, where they are so divided, frankly, they're getting very concerned themselves. There's this terrific book by Deborah Tan and the political scientist. It's called The Argument Culture, Stopping America's War of Words. And she's talking about what the media and the public information services are doing towards creating such a divided society in the United States on very fundamental issues, even abortion and the right to life. And the people who believe just the opposite things, and those and can't be brought to change their minds. And there too, they have violence on those issues too.
Okay.
So I'd say, please, let's talk about the public discourse and the role of the media and of all of us in the way we listen to others, respect their views, and then allow ourselves the privilege of being heard, because we listen to someone already. Whether this is within Parliament or it's in the public discourse in the media.
Dr. Bhalla, we may not have time for a very long answer, but how much then of the responsibility lies with television and perhaps with anchors in particular? And I ask that question of you as someone who's been an anchor on television as well. We tend to encourage the heat of debate. We shy away from shedding light because we believe that that requires concentration. People either won't concentrate or it will become heavy, dull and boring and the TRPs will disappear. Do we need to rethink the whole concept of television discussion so that meaningful television studios can become platforms where differences are exchanged and battles move off the street?
No, I'm afraid not. I mean, we've got, 100 channels, we've got about 20 English channels, etc. Basically competition should work. If the people don't want entertainment as well as education, they'll switch to channel A. If they only want shouting matches, they'll switch to channel B, C, D, E, and F. There is no way, and I don't think we should go down that path.
Okay.
The marketplace, if you will, much as a dirty word it is, should sort this out.
I'm going to stop you there. I want to bring in very quickly Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan, do you accept that defense of television discussion from Surjit Bhalla, or would you very quickly, literally in 10 seconds, want to put in a quick note of dissent?
No, unquestionably heat versus light, you put it right, and I believe there's too much heat. I don't agree that whatever people want should be given. If that's the case, then we should allow narcotics in the country, we should allow blue films in theatre, etc. There has to be some self-restraint, and we have to have an obligation to the country and the long-term interest. And one last word quickly about elections and politics. If there's quality representation, which is seen to be legitimate by the people, if they can ventilate grievances and really logically debate in the legislative chambers, much of the problem will be over. We always debate in legislatures, we're forgetting that.
All right,
that's no debate of worth mentioning in the legislatures.
That's a very important note for a discussion program to end on. We need to encourage debate, we need to speak out, but we also need to listen. That's something we often don't do. My thanks to Arun Mehra, Jayaprakash Narayan and Surjit Bhalla for joining me for this provocative and thoughtful discussion. And if you have been, thanks for listening. Goodbye.